I guess the notion of Christmas and December 25th, we got so used to the tradition of celebration that we kind of forget that the notion of Christmas is the birth of Jesus and Christ. And me wanting to know the truth, I always like to use history, biblical knowledge, science, whatever type of knowledge is out there to kind of put the accurate dates together for things. Now, the URANTIA book is the one source that outright says the birth of Jesus being August 21st, 7 BC. And that, I'm assuming, was written around in the 30s or something like that. The first person to make reference to any type of astronomical activity around the same time that could have created the whole tale about the Star of Bethlehem that correlates around Jesus' birth is Kepler. And Kepler came out, a long time ago in like the 1600s and said that there is this conjunction of planets of Saturn and Jupiter in the constellation of Pisces around 7 BC or sometime in late May, 7 BC. The URANTIA book also says that it was May 29th. And then that conjunction occurred 2 more times in that same year. But so that's kind of like no knowledge. And then now there are, as of I'd say like in the mid to late 80s, there's archaeological findings of Babylonian tablets that have similar astronomical almanacs reporting of this stellar activity. And so you can it's kind of a no-brainer to see that the 3 wise men, or these priests of Ur, which is modern-day Iraq, these Chaldean priests, were also of astronomical knowledge, right? So if they saw this kind of activity in certain areas, in certain constellations, Pisces being one of them, Pisces being kind of the house of water, and that's their god, Ea. And Ea goes back to, really has some ties back into Van. And I encourage any URANTIA book reader to go through that. But also some of the activity that went on with some of that stellar activity led these priests to believe that there would be a new king. And this kind of permeated throughout the Mesopotamian area. And so they made this voyage to Jerusalem, where they had this idea that there would be this new king of the Jews that would be being born, where the star was coming from or whatnot. It just so happens that exact statement of there being a new king of the Jews correlates with the time period of when Herod, who was running the whole Judean area at that time, in 7 BC, didn't want to be dethroned as, quote-unquote, temporary king of the Jews at that time, whatnot, in a political sense. So there's historic evidence in the Bible and in history of Herod declaring an assault and slaughtering all children of 2 years age and younger in Bethlehem. So that kind of correlates around with the time that that's happening, because he got this knowledge of the King of the Jews being born from these Chaldean priests who made their way into Bethlehem, into Jerusalem, and then into Bethlehem. So Herod historically dies in 4 BC. So the URANTIA book tells us, and the Bible tells us, through Matthew, that Joseph and Mary, right after Jesus was born, because of the massacre of the infants, fled to Egypt, and they hid. And it says it right here, that in Matthew chapter 3, when Herod had died, behold, the angel of the Lord appeared in a dream to Joseph in Egypt and said, "Rise, take the child and his mother, and go to the land of Israel. For those who sought the child's life are dead." So we have to assume that that's Herod at 4 BC. And you can then really start to pin down the date. And I find that what makes it really tricky here, in the URANTIA book gives great insight on it, of really nailing down the exact date of 7 BC instead of 8 BC, is because when Caesar Augustus decreed a census over the whole Roman Empire in 8 BC, as it says in the Divine Decrees of Augustus, which is online, anyone can look at it. Herod did not want to be numbered as a Jewish people. The kind of kingdom of Israel weren't too fond of being numbered as a people anyway. So he had a lot of uprising, and he made life difficult for Augustus. And so it wasn't for a whole year did they get back into decent favor with each other that then they could conduct the census in Judea. So that didn't happen until 7 BC as opposed to 8 BC when the Roman records state it happening. I doubt, in reflecting on his career, that Augustus wanted to mention that those Jews in Jerusalem made it difficult for him for a year to get his census finished. So.
You were saying right before we went on the air that a lot of young people are throwing the baby out with the bathwater because if this Jesus just lines up with all of these other myths, then Jesus is likely just a myth, and so therefore not true either. And I just wonder, what in your experience with some of your friends and stuff, what do you say to counteract that?
I'll just be like, well, you're totally right about all those dates as far as any type of mythology of different type of occult religions and stuff like that, and mystery cults, maybe the whole mythology of Horus, and that being December 25th, and resurrecting from the dead, the Mithraic cult of Mithras slaughtering the bull and immortalizing December 25th. I know there's
being
some
born
Nordic
of a virgin.
Yeah, being born
Mithras
of a virgin.
was born of a virgin. Yeah.
This is a heroic theme, Joseph Campbell, he's a talented philosopher, writer who studied Arthurian legends and the unconscious philosophy of dreams and spirituality, and he actually mentored George Lucas a little bit in the development of Star Wars. So this is this heroic myth, this heroic code that comes from Gilgamesh and before Gilgamesh, all the way down to Star Wars and beyond. And that's what we gravitate to, this hero who came from struggle and his father died, and maybe from a miraculous birth because he's part God, and has this immortality. But I like to see that myth as an analogy that we all have a fraction of God within us, and we can all go within through the underworld and get connected with our divine self, and then bring that back out and reflect that universal knowledge of God, intelligence, and God love to this world now. But that can be beautiful, but that isn't exactly Jesus' life. So Jesus' life isn't a myth. It was really going on. And the more accurate you can get with understand about what was really going on, the more you can pull from his influence, I feel like. So yeah, you do throw the baby out with the bathwater and you're just like, okay, because these certain evolutionary mythologies align in similarity and to date, you can easily say, okay, well then Jesus' mythology is just mythology. But here we have science and history and scripture that all back up the 7 BC birth date in the summer, too, late summer, because obviously no shepherds were out there while it was cold. No one's making this long migration in the winter. No pregnant woman wants to take the trip to Jerusalem when she's about to have a baby. The challenge of reflecting the person of Jesus, like accurate portrayal of Jesus, and that being so grounded in who you are that you're a reflection of Jesus living, actually living in all of us, in this kingdom of love. And I think that even this, what we're talking about now, and these factual dates and the astronomical occurrences and the census and everything, like that's not going to make somebody a believer in Jesus. They might be like, okay, that person existed in history, great. That's not my leader, that's not my master, that's not who I look up to, that's not who I go in to worship and try to connect with. So even that the teachings of Jesus are so experiential also, that it's even like made its way into our heroic myths, into our stories, these fantasies that we've created. But those of us who have chosen to seek out Jesus in our inner life, in our inner meditative spiritual world, and share our lives with Jesus, there's a transformation there that's very dynamic, and it's a personality that's very living, and you can like relate with it. And it doesn't mean that you have psychosis or schizophrenia or something like that. Like, it's very genuine, and only a person who honestly analyzes themselves to connect with spirit that way will give you an accurate reflection of their spiritual experiences and relationship to Jesus and the power of that spiritual personality in their life. So in that sense, people, I think, are gravitating to the spiritual influence of Jesus, but perhaps are limiting themselves to the full influence that they can receive and interact with, because there's so many convoluted evolutionary traditional messages and traditions that we can get distracted. And that's why when you have something like the URANTIA book, it's really important to be able to articulate what's in there, because they're really setting a lot of things straight for us. And but now we're in an interesting crux, because this being written, the URANTIA book being written when it was written, we are now in 2016, about to be in 2017. So even maybe your generation, Paula, Andre, Crystalline, when you were my age, you're like, this book is for the future or something like that. But now we're kind of in the future. Like, it's totally emerging around us all the time, this knowledge, this information. So now there's like even new challenges out here now of breaking tradition, being fearlessly without any kind of guidelines, scaffolding of old religion, and just kind of evolving honestly as the mores evolve with spirit in mind. And what will that look like? Is it just Christians who will then break free, or will there be people who are agnostic or secular find some frequency that they gravitate and resonate to that is from teachings of Jesus? You know, everyone that I speak to about real things that Jesus said, and I put it in a common modern day phraseology for people, they're all about it. They feel really good about it. They accept it as like human truth, and it influences them in a positive way. So the more that there's, I think, like reflection of modern Jesus, I don't know what you call that, hipster Jesus or something, but there's going to be there's going to be somebody who people can look up to as a hero, and it's not going to be something that's so archaic and out of touch from 2,000 years ago. It's so fascinating to me how heroic his life is, yet our story of heroism and our heroic myth tales now are it's interesting because it's more glorified in violence, and the hero comes back and smites the enemy, destroys them, you know, which is more of a messianic prophecy of revenge for the slaves and then building up the new temple and empire and happily ever after type of notion, right? But if you look at it, like, Jesus lived the heroic code to a T, yet was incredibly peaceful and brought a new way. So he brought the new heroic code. Basically what he did is he lived the whole heroic code and did it the right way, without sword, but with love. But the irony is that even though he said, look, I am of a spiritual kingdom, I'm here for God, I am not here for any type of evolutionary traditions, any rituals or superstitions or anything like that. And but the irony is that his life just like completely lined up with every prophecy, every astronomical occurrence, like every little like occult prophecy message. It just happened to correlate with also. Every heroic story it correlated with. Everything. Even though it wasn't his intention, but when you're the creator of the universe, that just happens in the periphery. It's a byproduct of truth already, probably. You know, like an evolutionary degradation of truth, some sort of mathematical reality. And so Jesus is that truth. And so, of course, a lot of things are going to align with his existence in physical reality, too. But I just think it's so poetic and beautiful the way that it correlated with every heroic myth part. Yet he did it so beautifully and peacefully and lovingly. That was the upgrade. That was the thing. Okay, here's the heroic code, you guys, and this is how to make it even more heroic. And that's to be peaceful, and that's to conquer your own inner kingdom. And his whole vernacular regarding kingdom was in a loving sense. When you're in the kingdom, it's of love. It's nothing that you're attacking or defending, not material. And so it's just, like I said, it's very poetic that he could do that. And I know he was well read. He would have been a great write. I can only imagine, like a great historian and a writer, had he chosen to write things.